I'm a nerd named Ryan. Let's talk about the Happiness Patrol. A little while back, I did a review of Remembrance of the Daleks, the first episode of Doctor Who Season 25, the first story of Doctor Who Season 25. And that was a fun video. I enjoyed making that one. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you want to go see it. But I figured it might be fun to go through the rest of Season 25 before the new Blu-ray box set comes out in October. And also I just want an excuse to watch Season 25 again because it's my favourite season of classic Doctor Who. So this, The Happiness Patrol, was the second story of Season 25. It is 3 episodes long, and it is one of my favourite stories. Much like Remembrance of the Daleks, I love this story so much. I'm actually currently wearing a Happiness Patrol t-shirt. It's got the pink TARDIS on it. I love the pink TARDIS, by the way. The pink TARDIS is fantastic. It looks fabulous. This is a real kind of comfort story for me. If I've had a shitty day at work, I can, come home and I'll be like, oh, I'll watch the Happiness Patrol, For lack of a better wording, for lack of a better term, it makes me happy, So let's talk about it. This story sees the Doctor and Ace land on Terra Alpha, an Earth colony under the leadership of Helen A. Now, on Terra Alpha, everyone is happy all the time. They have to be, because if they're not, Helen A will send the Happiness Patrol out to make them disappear. And that's if they're lucky. If they're unlucky, they might run into the Candyman, her ruthless henchman. First off, that's just a great setup for a story, a world where you're not allowed to be unhappy. I love that as a setup. I think it's really, really good. That's a, solid concept straight away for me. A lot of people kind of dismiss this story. I think a lot of people kind of look upon this one with not a lot of fondness. And, I can see why. There are a lot of people, I think, find this... I think some people... I've heard some people say they find this one kind of silly, kind of a bit dumb, and it's, I can see why. It looks a little bit over the top. It's very brightly coloured. It's very campy at times. The Candyman is ridiculous. We'll get to him, because I kind of love him. So I wouldn't blame people for kind of looking at the design of the Candyman, or, how the thing looks, or like a few clips here and there, and thinking, oh, this is just some fluffy Doctor Who nonsense, right? But what I think is really great about the Happiness Patrol is that underneath that kind of shiny, brightly coloured, wacky exterior, you have this really quite dark political satire. I mean, Helen A, played by Sheila Hancock, the main antagonist, is very clearly an allegory for Margaret Thatcher, who was the Prime Minister at the time. This is not a secret, and it's not subtle. It's very much a Margaret Thatcher allegory, or parody even at times. And I think it works really, really well. I think Sheila Hancock plays the part brilliantly. She's fantastic. Helen A is a really, really good villain. So yeah, big fan of her. We also get another villain to contend with, which is this guy here, the Candyman. There he is. The Candyman, who... I sort of love the Candyman as well, because while Helen A is a fairly menacing villain, with this kind of, again, with this glossy kind of smiley exterior, the Candyman is kind of incompetent as a villain, and I kind of love that. The Doctor, considering the Candyman is supposed to be this kind of, this ruthless henchman, the Doctor defeats him fairly easily multiple times. So I kind of like how crap the Candyman is. I sort of like that, and him and his creator / partner, Gilbert, they're fantastic. They kind of go back and forth with their bickering. I love that. That's some of the funniest stuff in the episode, is the Candyman and Gilbert bickering. Like an old married couple in a way. It's really, really fantastic. Those two are great. Gilbert's a good character as well. There's a few characters in this where you sort of see them and they work with Helen A, or they work for the Happiness Patrol, but you suspect maybe they're not so happy with, their place in the system. And I think Gilbert's one of those, kind of when you look at him and you look at his performance, you're like, he's going to turn on Helen A, and sure enough he does towards the end. Then there's Susan Q, who's like this unhappy guard, who she kind of, betrays the Happiness Patrol very, very early, when she helps Ace kind of escape. She kind of befriends Ace and helps Ace escape at one point. So she kind of joins this resistance along with Ace and the Doctor and Earl, a blues singer who's down there as well. So there's a lot of interesting characters and a lot of interesting character moments in this story. And again, like I say, underneath this kind of wacky, over-the-top sort of exterior, the way the story looks on the surface, you have this really great sort of quite dark story, this political satire. It gets dark in places, like the way the Candyman executes people. Some of them are really quite nasty looking deaths, man. There's a lot of deaths in this as well. So yeah, we have this kind of dark and quite clever social and political commentary and satirical story under this kind of bright, glossy exterior, and I just love it. Like I say, it's a real comfort episode for me. I think it's really, really good. It's really well paced as well. Like, it's 3 episodes, so it doesn't kind of outstay its welcome. But it also doesn't rush, it has moments where the story can kind of chill and it can kind of breathe. It's not just go, 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 go all the way through. I like the pacing. I think Graham Curry, who wrote the script, did a fantastic job. Absolutely wonderful stuff. Directed by Chris Clough as well, the directing on this is great, fantastic. I like Fifi as well, who's Helen A's little pet monster thing. That's really cool. That's a nice, that's a really, good looking puppet. I say good looking, not good looking like handsome. You know what I mean? It's a well designed puppet. You know what I mean? You know what I meant. But really, the thing that stands out for me in the Happiness Patrol is the thing that stands out throughout all of season 25 and season 26, and that is the duo of the Doctor and Ace. I love the Doctor and Ace as a duo. They are my favourite TARDIS team. I think Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred have such a great chemistry. First of all, those two work really, really well together, and they play off each other so well. There's a bit where they kind of are outsmarting the Candyman, and they're going kind of back and forth with him. And yeah, they just have such a wonderful chemistry. They play off each other really, really well. And I like how each of their characters is utilised here. First off, you've got Ace, who, is very much, a character who... She's very much for the resistance. Up the Killjoys. The Killjoys are the miserable people who... who are made to disappear by the Happiness Patrol. No one gets killed on Terra Alpha. They're made to disappear. They disappear, right? So the people who disappear, who are branded Killjoys, at one point, Ace shouts, "Up the Killjoys!" She's very much that kind of face of resistance, of rebellion, and against everything that Helen A and the Happiness Patrol stand for. And they play that brilliantly. It's wonderfully written. Sophie Aldred plays it perfectly, as she always did. Sophie Aldred's just really good in Doctor Who. Ace is such a great character. She's my favourite companion. I love her. She's great. But this story is really a showcase for Sylvester McCoy. Sylvester McCoy is magnificent as the Doctor. He is extraordinary as the Doctor. Much like how the story is kind of this dark and kind of quite clever satire underneath its glossy exterior, the Doctor kind of is that in a way. You look at Sylvester McCoy and you look at how he plays the Doctor, you look at his performance, and you see he's kind of this kind of wacky buffoon. He plays the spoons. He, says, bad joke. He makes bad jokes, and he's, this kind of singing, dancing clown. If you look at him on a surface level, but behind that exterior, he's planning stuff. He's always planning. He's always like 2 or 3 steps ahead of everyone else, this version of the Doctor. He's always got a plan, and he knows how to work people. He's manipulating events from behind the scenes pretty much straight away. You see on a couple of occasions how he manipulates people, how he manages to play people against each other and stuff like that. It's a really, really good performance. And Sylvester McCoy, when he kind of goes dark with the Doctor, he ends up being one of the darkest interpretations. It's strange how he manages to somehow both be one of the most whimsical versions of the Doctor while also being one of the most brutal and ruthless in other stories. Not so much in this one, but in other stories he is. There are bits where he's kind of brutal and kind of ruthless in this, and very much, again, very manipulative. There's a part in the 2nd episode where he's confronted by a guard with a gun, and the guard is pointing the gun at him, and he just looks at him and says, "Shoot me. Go on, shoot me." And it's masterful watching him kind of manipulate this guard and getting him to give up his gun without using any action, without using any force, because the Doctor is always the cleverest person in the room. And I love the way Sylvester McCoy plays the Doctor, and in this episode he is fantastic. He's wonderful. Again, he can kind of shift from being this kind of goofy, wacky, sort of very overly friendly guy to being quite dark and menacing in places. It's a part where, right towards the end, where he's trying to convince Helen A that, you know, it's not right to be happy all of the time, and she, you know, she isn't listening to him, and then she sees Fifi, her pet, that has been killed, and she starts crying. She just breaks down and sobs, and Ace is like, should we do something? And he just goes, it's done. And it's just so deadpan, and there's such a subtle kind of nuance to Sylvester McCoy's performance, which you kind of don't always pick up on, because when he goes over the top, he goes very over the top and very wacky. But it's in those quieter moments where he becomes my favourite Doctor. He's just wonderful in this. There's another part where the Doctor and Ace are in the waiting zone, because there are no prisons on Terra Alpha. Prisons are dreadfully miserable places. There are no prisons. There's the waiting zone. And at one point, another guy in the waiting zone is killed, and Ace is angry. She wants to attack the guard, and the Doctor kind of is holding her back, saying, don't do it, Ace, don't do it, and, you know, calming her down. And there's a great little exchange between them where Ace, with all this fury in her eyes, says, I want to make them all very unhappy. And the Doctor so quietly and so subtly just goes, don't worry, we will. And it's in a way, it's kind of chilling. It's amazing acting. Again, so Sophie Aldred and Sylvester McCoy, they just play off each other so brilliantly, and they work really, really well here. And I think as well what's great about this, and this is, again, I think Graham Curry's writing and Chris Clough as director did this brilliantly. It never feels tonally inconsistent. Like I said, there are moments where it's very dark and very, you know, very much kind of leaning into the social and political commentary. But then there are other scenes that are very over the top, very wacky, very kind of fun and whimsical. Again, when Gilbert and the Candyman are arguing, brilliant comedy. But it never feels like it's, you know, it never feels like there's a big tonal shift. You know, it feels very natural how we transition from, you know, a funny scene with the Candyman to a serious scene, you know, talking about kind of political oppression, you know what I mean? So it's brilliantly done, and I think it's a story that a lot of people who maybe haven't seen this one for a while, they just remember, oh, it's the one with the Bertie Bassett's monster, and they kind of dismiss it as, you know, being silly Doctor Who fluff. I've seen some people do that online, but I think when people rewatch it, when people revisit it, when people give it a chance, they kind of understand that, yeah, this is actually one of the most intelligent political stories Doctor Who's ever told. It's one of the most fun stories Doctor Who's ever told, and it's just a wonderful, brilliant story in a wonderful, brilliant season. I love the Happiness Patrol. Happiness will prevail. It's so, so good. If you haven't watched it for a while, I would recommend checking it out. Or if you've never seen it, I would recommend checking it out, because I think this is classic Who at its absolute best. Don't let the, you know, shiny, glossy exterior fool you. This is a dark and very clever piece of television, a very well thought out piece of television, and a very well made piece of television. I love this episode so, so much. But why don't you let me know what you think of the Happiness Patrol? Any thoughts you have on it, drop them down in the comments. That's all from me. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you when I see you. Bye.